Welcome to another episode of Mastering Cybersecurity, developed by baremetalcyber.com. Let's dive in. A useful way to understand honeypots is to picture a safe, isolated decoy that looks tempting to intruders while keeping real systems out of reach. This approach helps beginners grasp how defenders can observe attacks without risking core business services or customer data. The goal in using a decoy is learning because every probe, login attempt, or script reveals attacker behavior and tools. A honeypot gives defenders time to notice patterns, validate monitoring, and rehearse calm responses before real damage occurs. The idea fits naturally into layered defense, since a decoy complements controls that block, detect, and investigate issues across the environment. By the end of this episode, the concept will feel practical, the risks will be clearer, and the path to responsibly trying a simple setup will be understandable. A honeypot is a deliberately exposed system or service that pretends to be valuable so attackers interact with it while defenders quietly watch. It differs from a full deception platform, which coordinates many moving parts and often automates response across larger environments with policy controls. It also differs from a honey token, which is a planted piece of data, such as a fake password or document, that alerts when touched anywhere it travels. Decoy accounts are user identities that appear real but exist mainly to detect misuse rather than to serve business needs. A honeynet expands the idea into a small, believable network of decoys, so actions feel consistent from one machine to another. These distinctions matter because the objectives, complexity, and safety requirements are not identical across each technique. Honeypots serve three simple objectives that reinforce one another when planned thoughtfully and monitored carefully. The first is early detection, because unusual traffic stands out against a decoy that should receive no legitimate connections or data. The second is intelligence gathering, since transcripts, files, and tool fingerprints reveal techniques and priorities used by intruders in the wild. The third is attacker delay, because time spent poking at a decoy is not spent moving inside real systems with genuine business data. Honeypots are not primary prevention or a substitute for patching, identity hardening, or strong network architecture in production. They are best viewed as instruments that enrich visibility and learning while other core protections continue carrying the heavier load. Architectures and placement determine what you will observe and how safely you can observe it over time. A standalone decoy can live in a demilitarized zone, DMZ, where exposure is expected and segmentation is already strong. A small honeynet can add believability by providing multiple hosts, minor naming conventions, and polite relationships that resemble a trimmed corporate footprint. Internal placement often focuses on detecting lateral movement, while external placement tends to capture internet-wide scanning and automated exploitation waves. On-premises deployments offer physical control, while cloud deployments in a virtual private cloud, VPC, offer speed, isolation features, and flexible routing. Thoughtful placement balances realism, expected traffic patterns, and the blast radius if something goes wrong despite safeguards. Honeypots become far more effective when integrated with a central security information and event management (SIEM) platform that aggregates signals. Forwarding events allows correlation with authentication logs, endpoint alerts, and network detections across the broader monitoring stack. Tuning alerts prevents fatigue by suppressing noisy probes and highlighting multi-stage behaviors indicating movement beyond simple scanning. Runbooks and lightweight response playbooks clarify who reviews evidence, what triage steps are taken, and how to escalate concerns when necessary. Intrusion Detection System (IDS) and Intrusion Prevention System (IPS) records sit alongside the decoy's telemetry to sharpen context and confirm severity. Over time, the SIEM view teaches patterns, accelerates investigations, and exposes gaps worth fixing before a real incident emerges. Safety and containment protect both the organization and the internet at large from unintended consequences during experiments. Network segmentation enforces boundaries so attackers cannot pivot from the decoy into production resources where real data lives. Egress controls restrict outbound connections to prevent the decoy from participating in spam runs, denial of service traffic, or command and control activity. Rate limits, file execution policies, and frequent resets further reduce the chance that the system becomes a launchpad for harm under your watch. Legal and ethical reviews confirm logging practices, consent banners, and geographic considerations when observing behavior across different jurisdictions and partners. Data handling plans also consider personally identifiable information (PII) risks if attackers upload stolen records because custodianship and deletion expectations differ by law. Deception techniques can enrich a basic honeypot without making it obvious or brittle during ordinary probing and automated scans. A honey token is a deliberately planted secret, such as a fake password, key, or document, that raises an alert when used in any environment beyond the decoy. Canary files and directory breadcrumbs hint at interesting paths, while embedded beacons quietly notify defenders when those files are opened or exfiltrated. Fake credentials stored in predictable places can detect password spraying and credential stuffing when attackers test them against real services. Lightweight application banners and error messages can be tuned to guide intruders toward the decoy's most instrumented areas without feeling contrived or inconsistent. Every added trick should serve a clear detection or learning purpose because excess flourish invites suspicion and reduces credibility. Honeypots consistently reveal a handful of attacker behaviors that help defenders reason about priority and risk in practical terms. Early interactions often include broad scanning, default credential trials, and hasty exploitation attempts against well-known weaknesses from public advisories. Later stages may show tool downloads, crypto miner deployment, scheduled tasks, and persistence techniques aimed at surviving restarts and simple cleanups. Analysts reviewing artifacts extract indicators of compromise, IOCs, such as hashes, domains, file paths, and command patterns that match families of tools. These IOCs enrich block lists, hunting queries, and future detections in the wider environment with minimal extra effort. Behavioral notes about timing, error handling, and operator choices also inform tabletop exercises and training scenarios that emphasize realism. Clear use cases and success measures keep honeypots grounded in outcomes rather than novelty or academic interest alone. Malware collection supports safe reverse engineering and better detections on endpoints with signatures and behavior rules that match your observed families. Credential stuffing insights appear when fake passwords are tried against decoys and then reused against real services, which validates protections and strengthens policy reviews. Botnet telemetry shows scanning waves, repeat visits, and geographic patterns that sharpen defense priorities for patching and external filtering over time. Dwell time trends indicate whether decoys are holding attention longer as realism improves, which suggests better intelligence without unacceptable risk exposure. Reduced false positives across the seam confirms improved tuning, while sharper investigations show that the learning loop around decoys is genuinely paying off. A small, carefully scoped walkthrough helps make the idea feel tangible without turning into an unsafe treasure hunt for beginners. Imagine launching a minimalist Linux virtual machine in a controlled cloud account with strict outbound restrictions and narrow inbound rules. A simple web service banner and a visible secure shell prompt present believable targets while logging every interaction, command, and file change thoroughly. Events stream to the SIEM alongside firewall, endpoint, and authentication records so patterns emerge quickly during triage. Within hours, the first alerts likely include automated scans, default credential attempts, and known exploit payloads that fail harmlessly due to containment. An analyst correlates timing, extracts IOCs, and confirms that surrounding controls behave as expected, which builds confidence in the overall monitoring posture. The first alerts from a new decoy are usually noisy but surprisingly instructive when you evaluate them patiently and methodically. Repeated probes against the same port suggest active campaigns, while sequence patterns reveal the tools driving the attacker's workflow during the initial contact. Scripted behavior often fails in distinctive ways, leaving error messages, malformed requests, or puzzling paths that trace back to public toolkits. Each artifact enriches searches and block rules, and repeated appearances in production logs validate the decoy's relevance to your actual threat landscape. When combined with endpoint telemetry and network detections, the decoy's story clarifies priorities for patching and configuration hardening across adjacent assets. Over several cycles, the organization gains a steady rhythm of learning, tuning, and verification without gambling with real business systems. Over time, the decoy can support simple experiments that answer practical questions without interrupting production workflows or distracting busy teams. Adjusting banners and host names reveals how easily scanners classify your environment and which labels draw unwanted attention most quickly. Introducing a believable canary file tests whether exfiltration routes exist, while carefully monitored fake credentials show whether password reuse patterns are being targeted. Comparing behavior across internal and external placements uncovers differences between opportunistic scanning and lateral movement attempts by more determined actors. Each experiment creates a small packet of evidence paired with a conclusion that can inform security reviews, change tickets, and training curricula. The steady accumulation of such evidence shifts honeypots from novelty to a reliable instrument in the defensive toolkit. Even modest honeypot programs benefit from disciplined housekeeping so operators remain safe, calm, and effective during spikes of activity. Regular resets clear contamination while preserving captured data. And gold images ensure reproducibility when rebuilding decoys after heavy interaction. Access to decoy consoles should follow the same identity rules as production, because violations here become blind spots that degrade the value of the learning exercise. Documentation for network paths, logging destinations, and rebuild steps keeps institutional knowledge fresh and transferable across personnel changes. Periodic reviews with legal and privacy teams validate ongoing appropriateness as laws evolve and partners change their expectations around monitoring. This cadence helps the practice remain sustainable rather than becoming an abandoned project that adds noise without insight. When a honeypot effort matures, teams often revisit scope to match new questions and threat observations across the environment. High-interaction designs become attractive for targeted research once monitoring and containment improve to a point where risk is manageable. Analysts use SIEM timelines, endpoint logs, and packet captures to reconstruct narratives that support training, tabletop rehearsals, and tooling improvements. Patterns in IOCs indicate where detection content should be refreshed and where automation might remove drudgery from repetitive triage. As the organization's confidence grows, the decoy estate tends to become smaller and smarter rather than larger and unruly. The end state favors focused instruments with clear purposes over sprawling setups that promise more than they can safely deliver. A short, practical recap captures when honeypots help and where caution governs the healthy limits of experimentation. Honeypots are decoys that reveal attacker behavior, sharpen monitoring, and buy time, yet they do not replace patching, identity controls, or solid architecture. Low-interaction designs teach safely, while high-interaction options demand stronger containment and clearer use cases for research. Placement, data capture, and SIEM integration determine how much value appears in investigations and how confidently analysts can explain events. Safety measures, legal reviews, and disciplined housekeeping keep the practice responsible, respectful, and sustainable for busy security teams. Used thoughtfully within layered defense, well-designed decoys turn curiosity into evidence and evidence into steady improvements without risking core business systems. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.